Hello, Scott Golden with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel here with the continuation of our World Class Championship Wrestling review series. This episode is the January 9th, 1982 episode. Upon further investigation, I realized there are gaps in the episodes. I wonder if they did not have air dates on those dates or if the original master tapes were lost. If anybody knows where the remainder of January and some of February went in 1982, please educate me. And if there is footage available that is not on the network, then maybe I can seek it out anyway. But in any event, just some overviews. And for those that aren't familiar, this is my first time watching the episodic nature of WCCW for the first time. I've seen various footage and matches over several years, but never watched it episodically week to week. So this is going to be a fun undertaking for me. We open with Raul Castro versus Captain Frank Dusek. Dusek really is a old school, I guess, heel guy who, from what I could gather in the match, just basically was very punch kick based. But again, at the time, uh, that would get over and suffice for 35, 36 years ago. And in a lot of ways, I think we lose when we don't have that. Um, Castro, who is a masked star, we don't know much about going into this, reminds me of your generic luchador that you would see in WCW a decade and a half later in the late '90s, who didn't really get a lot of push and pump from the announcers, but at the same time was competitive. And it seems that Dusek is doubling as a manager here. There's an acknowledgement of his alignment with Wild Bill Irwin, who I later learned his name was Chauncey. So I don't know if there's a story behind that or if that was his legal name or combination of both. But anyway, um, I mean, this match in general is relatively basic. I like the fact that the strikes, when we look at Dusek especially, and others throughout the program as well, were properly sold, and also each strike looked like it hurt or at least mattered and counted for something. Now we see, guys take uh, 4 or 5 MMA blows and they're still standing and they're standing there begging for more. And it looked like, even in this scenario, that Dusek, who I guess wasn't a full time wrestler at the point, at least it was portrayed that he was splitting his time with managing, still could bring it, and obviously he wins the match rather handily. We then move to what I consider to be a really bizarre promo. Big Daddy Bundy, otherwise known as King Kong Bundy, a little bit later. Matter of fact, in a matter of months here, and then he goes on to Mid South, and then of course a few years later, the WWF and a main event with Hulk Hogan. But here he is a supposed Alaskan who has commissioned Jose Lothario to train him, which just strikes me as odd in the sense of if you are going to learn to wrestle, wouldn't you go with, I don't know, another big man? They continually push the idea of Bundy versus Andre, and he is compared to Andre several times. Of course, at this point, Andre the Giant is still a touring attraction across several territories. That's only going to be probably for about another year and a half. But here, the idea of Bundy and Andre is a major attraction for the Texas faithful. Lothario, again, very thick accent, hard to understand upon occasion. And I think also, too, he's playing up the accent in so much as, I've heard interviews where he's a little bit clearer, so maybe having a population which is heavily Hispanic in certain areas, and the fact that he was known as a Latin star and lucha libre was a big thing. He's kind of able to be more himself, for lack of a better term. Bundy talks about wanting challenges, talks about Kabuki among other people, and again they tease Andre somewhere down the line. Jesse Leon versus Wild Bill Irwin. Once again, the name Chauncey is used. I don't know the story behind it. If somebody does, please comment below because I'm curious um, whether that's his legit name. That's what the announcer said, but I have difficulty with the credibility of their lead announcer in that there are moves that he will name things that I've never heard them called before, and I just wonder if he's not following in line with things. It actually is confirmed by the guest analyst Fritz von Erich, who is the also the owner of the promotion at the time, that that goes in the direction of things coming along and being a greater thing. And so we then move to uh, a promo post the Bill Irwin match. Irwin again using a lot of strikes, using some leg scissors, but also just really basic maneuvers and using bit more stalling tactics. We move into a promo though from Gary Hart. Gary Hart is managing and representing the Great Kabuki. Basically, an over establishment of that promo is very simply put um, that the idea behind Kabuki is to pretty much destroy all competition. He is placed in an area where beating the heck out of the Von Erichs seems like something he's set up to do. Mystery, acknowledgement of his time in the Orient, acknowledgement of him being a big deal, and kind of a guy who is used in a heel role, but very easily could be transitioned if you wanted to into a babyface kind of mythical character. Although I don't know that that's ever done, but it just felt here like maybe in today's world or even a few years later, if Texas needed a pump, having a face painted or mystery martial arts character would have been helpful. We go to Kabuki versus Kerry Von Erich. Match is so simple. Kerry, to me, is one of the major tragedies, certainly the whole Von Erich family, so many of them dying and so many suicides and all that is a tragedy. But I really wonder if Kerry had stayed straight and off of the drugs, what could have been for him. I mean, just the level at which the Sportatorium crowd comes alive for Kerry Von Erich is phenomenal. It's something that if you're not familiar with the territory or if you're not necessarily a fan of old school wrestling, I think going back and checking out how over Kerry really was. And I know I've seen the Ric Flair match from later in the year, and I'm excited to see that again just because there's so much behind Kerry being a guy that could be built, that they could build a territory around. Obviously, moving towards the idea of the Von Erichs as American Tag Champions, that comes. Kerry and Kevin both have runs with singles belts, but here, what I liked about this was Kerry didn't have to do a lot and got so much mileage out of just punches and kicks and overcoming nerve holds. I liked the fact too that Kabuki throughout the match, even though this ends in a non-finish, almost double countout type situation, um, it makes you want to come back. Fritz gets involved in the finish too when there's distraction and everybody kind of tries to lay out Kerry. It's really an amazing, just simplistic process, but also a reminder that a babyface that's really over can captivate a whole audience really quickly. Also, obviously, the Von Erichs are pushed really, really heavily for the duration of the world-class promotion, as is to be expected. They haven't even really caught on yet. They don't until the Freebirds are there. And when I say haven't caught on, they haven't hit their stride. Not that they weren't valuable. But again, Kabuki is kept strong. The interference of Gary Hart and the reality of Fritz Von Erich, who at this point I believe is retired, does eventually come out of retirement several times, but at this point is retired, getting into it with Gary Hart. And oddly enough, I don't remember the injury to Gary, but I believe there was a back injury from perhaps one of the plane crashes of wrestling lore. But certainly a long-term injury. Gary doesn't take a lot of bumps, but even the idea that Fritz was laying hands on Gary Hart, and Gary Hart doesn't leave his feet, but the punches are there. That crowd comes alive for that. And so this match is to be continued as there is not a direct finish in the contest. Fritz does advocate that Kerry wins. The referee, however, does not agree. Then we move on to Carlos Zapata versus Kevin Von Erich. Again, seeing Kevin wear boots is just bizarre to me. Kevin, a little bit, from my understanding of the Von Erichs, and again, my knowledge of them is going to grow as I go through the world class library. But my understanding of the Von Erichs is that Kevin is a little bit more hard to contain, a little stiffer. I notice he's moving around the ring even a little bit quicker than Kerry is, and Kerry moves very fast when he's inspired. Of course, keeping Kerry inspired with all the drug use and challenges that he had in his personal life, and that would come about certainly after losing his foot in the motorcycle accident was difficult. But Kevin here is able to get a victory with a leg scissors. And again, one thing I like is that there's you had smaller locker rooms back then. So a locker room of, let's say, 20 guys is a locker room that can fill out a card. And so every guy, even an enhancement talent, has value. And so, I mean, Kevin has really good drop kicks worth seeing. But again, just listening to the crowd and realizing that to them, the Von Erichs were their Hulk Hogan. The Von Erichs were their Sergeant Slaughter of the time. The Von Erichs were, Bob Backlund still at the championship at this point. So their version of a charismatic Bob Backlund is just really interesting to watch and worth going out of your way to see if you haven't seen World Class before. Now, the main event match here with Brooks and Arman Hussein versus Boogaloo Shaft and Jose Lothario. We do not see a championship change here. We do see carnage at the end of the match, and it really does feel kind of like a non-finished situation. And what I'm noting here, as I did not write down the exact finish, is ultimately Lothario has to do so little punches and kicks, but the entire crowd's behind him. Tom Shaft is the African American fellow who's winning the Tough Man, and what's interesting is even guys like Tim Brooks, who at this point has been decades into the business, and Arman Hussein, who is more of a manager or transitioning more towards manager. Both of them are bumping around for Shaft. Shaft, to me, has a lot of potential. Again, really a non-finish here, although the champions do walk away ahead and with a victory. But it's just interesting to me that a lot of people tell the story of World Class where it's all the Von Erich territory. But even when we're here in 1982, the enhancement talents at the time were given competitive enough situations where, no, you didn't think they were going to win. But if I'm watching this for the first time, I believe that every one of the enhancement talents is credible enough that on the right day they could win, which I think is missing from today's professional wrestling. Once again, I will be going into more of the world-class efforts, hopefully on a daily basis. My goal is to get all of World Class, all 300-plus episodes or whatever's on the network, up and available in review format for you as we move into the end of the year, and hopefully before that, if everything goes according to plan, but I don't want to overpromise. But again, this is worth watching simply for the development of and continued development of baby faces who, yes, obviously Fritz Von Erich is going to push his sons. I wish I had seen more of David. David, of course, has the issues in Japan and passes away. But regardless, the Von Erichs at this point are not household names, but easily could be household names nationwide. We will move to the next episode, which is the February 6th, 1982 episode, and then the episode after that is February 20th. So there are some missing episodes. I'd be interested in those. Overall, my impressions of World Class thus far are that everybody on the card has a place and that everybody works hard. That I wonder if that's part of the territorial nature, or if this is just the territory, or maybe it's starting early and it'll change over time. So anyway, continue with me on this journey through World Class Championship Wrestling. I encourage you, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.